Molly Donahue. Molly is a former state rep from Cedar Rapids area. She's now a state senator uh, from Linn County, Cedar Rapids area, and she's now running for county supervisor. And in 2 years from now, she'll be running for governor. Just joking, Molly. And but Molly's is like Molly Buck. I mean, she's been doing a lot of hard work up at the state capitol over these last almost 4 months now. So I'm going to stop and just have you talk now for 5 minutes, Molly. Then after about 5 minutes, we're going to give it to Patrick to ask you 2 or 3 questions, whatever time permits. Then I'll close it up in the last 30 seconds, right at 7:30. So, Molly, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mitch. It's good to see you and everybody else on here. It's always good to follow the other Molly. both teachers. And I was thrilled that when I left the house that another Molly went in as a teacher. So that way there's always a teacher in there that's named Molly. But and I might fight her for the superintendent of schools.
Okay.
Or maybe director of education, since we are both more qualified than the person that they have up for the
definitely.
So I am Molly Donahue, and I ran the first time in 2016 for State House against Ken Reiser. I did lose in 2016, but 3 days later, I was like, this is ridiculous. He's horrible. And I'm going to run again. So I knew within 3 days that I was going to run again. I spent that whole first month of that particular session that I had lost up at the State House, because that was the year of collective bargaining being gutted. So I was up there every night after school. I'd teach all day and drive there, and I'd be there until midnight and drive back home and teach in the morning at 7:30 in the morning. And then I'd turn around and drive right back up because of all the things that were going on at the Capitol that particular year. It was the beginning of probably some of the toughest years for educators. We had some tough years prior, but that was the beginning of the attacks on educators, as Molly Buck had just kind of pretty much talked about a little bit. You can't outpay the attacks. So I spent the next 2 years waiting to run again. And once I turned in my paperwork, Ken Reiser decided to drop out and had his best friend run against me instead, who taught down the hall from me. So I ran against the gentleman down the hall and beat him, so that I could become the representative for the Marion area and parts of Cedar Rapids at that point. I ran because of education, and I was asked to run originally by Mark Smith, who was the leader in the House at the time. And I ran because of education and knowing that there were issues with education, but I learned so much in the 4 years that I was in the House about all of the other issues that actually happen and are going on a daily basis around our state. And it really drew my attention away from education, even though that's still my main focus because of my background with my different committees. They make sure that I'm always where I'm most needed, but I have a lot of other areas that are very, very important to me now because of what I learned as a state rep those first few years. I decided to switch over to Senate a couple of years ago because of the change in the maps, and my personal senator was going to drop out and run for Congress. So it opened up a spot, and it also, quite frankly, let me keep my area. And that was very important to me. I live in Marion, and I wanted to make sure I got to stay with my Marion folks. Had I stayed just as a rep, I would have lost almost my entire area except my neighborhood. It was really strange how my neighborhood got cut out into Cedar Rapids, but the whole Marion section was removed. So it was important to me to run because I wanted to keep Marion, and I was happy to pick up the Cedar Rapids area as well. But I really wanted to keep Marion for the relationships and the different things that I've been doing and working with all the different people in Marion. Just wanted to keep those relationships going and continue working with all of them and the constituents. I mean, obviously I like Marion or I wouldn't live there, right? And I like the people and I like what's going on there. So you know what? Guess what? Running for supervisor, I get to keep Marion. It's been kind of a theme all the way through, as long as I get to keep my area and most of the people that I have gotten to know and work with. And that's the plan. But so as a senator here, my main goal this year has been, the working on the AEAs. And unfortunately, I had to spend another 30 minutes on the floor today talking about the destruction of the AEAs and how it's going to hurt our public schools. And all along, whether I was in the House or or the last couple of years in the Senate, everything that we've ever worked on, even though I'm voting for Marion, I know that I represent everybody in Iowa, every vote I take. And I also know that there are 13 towns right around Marion that have very small school districts. And those have been a concern the entire time that I've been in Des Moines about what's happening to those school districts as they consolidate, as they worry about whether or not they can stay open. And now with what's happening, it's even more dire for a lot of them with the vouchers last year. And now with the AEAs this year, we're looking at some really tough years ahead for some of those small communities all through rural Iowa. And so being in this running for supervisor really is going to allow me to go back home and try to help do what's necessary to protect those smaller rural districts and communities, because we know that when schools shut down, businesses shut down, and the towns shut down. And that's a lot of people who would be moving away from Iowa. And so that's one of the reasons why it's so important to me to run for this different position. My whole career, 33 years of teaching, I've been to service to my community, and that's what's most important to me, and making sure that my community is thriving and moving forward. And I think that I could do a good job making sure that I could help those smaller communities continue to find ways to grow economically, even though there are so many different barriers being put up for them by the state. What
Well,
else? Well, I don't know if you need any more about me or not.
Well, we're actually going to give you over to Patrick now because he's going to
Okay.
ask you a couple questions. And so Patrick Borchak, our chair of our election endorsement committee, will ask Molly a couple questions, 2 or 3, whatever time permits.
Thank you, Mitch, and thank you, Molly, for joining us tonight. So as you know, you were given a questionnaire. You responded to that, sent it back to us. We reviewed it as a group, and we have a couple clarifying questions for you. So the first one is question number 7, asked how you would increase citizen involvement in county government. You answered that you would utilize many of the things that you've done as a representative in the community by being present at events and activities within municipalities, as well as offering meeting times in each town or for coffee to hear what citizens have to say or have concern about, as well as sharing information in order to keep people informed with what's happening around their community through the county offices. So while these are all sound measures to increase access to county government, the old adage of leading a horse to water comes to mind. So what ideas do you have beyond increasing access to county government that can actually engage them and make them want to take action in a positive way?
Well, the first thing is, I think that when you are available to the public and they can come and talk to you, and you're approachable about different things, that a lot of times lets them see that they do have a voice. And if you have a voice, then you have a reason to get involved and participate. Obviously, there are lots of different things we could do beyond having coffees and whatever, but making sure that we have some kind of drive for voting, making sure that we get voters out, because that's a huge issue. As we all know, in Iowa, we had over 75,000 Democrats alone that did not vote in the last election. So it's important to make sure that the people understand that their voice matters. And I think the best way to do that is to actually be out with the people. When I was in the State House and in the Senate, I knocked, in the State House one year, I did 20,000 doors myself. My team did another 7, but I did the 20. I think it's important to be out in front of the people and talking to the people, and that's the only way to get them to understand that they're part of the system and that they're welcome in the system. So again, we can get people out through those things, but anytime we have any way we can get people out to understand that their vote does matter, and making sure people get registered, making sure they come out and vote when we have elections, whether it's at the local level for the schools or whether it's the presidential, that all of them matter. And that, I mean, really, that's my best way, is just to get out and talk to people about it.
Okay, thank you. Question 9 of the questionnaire asks if you support county government programs that provide opportunities for residents to receive food assistance. You answered yes, and that when our governor turned away funding to feed children in the summer, you contacted your county supervisors asking that they write a letter to the USDA and to Secretary Vilsack asking how they might be able to utilize those funds at the county level to make sure kids in your county receive the food assistance needed during the summer. So what other action steps are you taking, or can you take going forward in this regard? Also, what support can the county provide when the federal and state governments do not?
So the county obviously is dependent on the state for the funding that they receive, and they have a budget of like $140 million that gets split out. But there are some things that, as far as making sure people have their needs met, making sure food banks have funding from the county if necessary, to fill in some of those gaps that they have. There is funding available that the county can utilize in some of those programs, whether it be the shelters, which I know that Ben Rogers is very involved in, and using county funds to making sure people have shelter when they need shelter. So, and then as well with the food banks and different groups that actually provide meals, whether it be Meals on Wheels. There are ways that county funding can help with making sure that those programs are sustainable and viable, and we can help backfill what they aren't receiving from the public and the state and whatever different grants that they receive. So the county is just another layer to help those programs and help the people who are in need.
Molly and Patrick, we have 2 minutes remaining.
Okay, thank you, Mitch. Molly, why don't you take the last minute and a half to give your final pitch on why we should endorse you?
Well, why I think you should endorse me is because you will not find a candidate who will fight harder for the people and making sure that they all get what they need, and whether it be in the city or whether it be out in the county and out into our rural areas. I know that I'm considered a city girl living in Marion, right? It's not the big town, but it's town to people who are living in the rural area. But I have to remind people that my family owns a farm. It's not a big farm. It's a very little farm. We've had it since 1890. We don't farm it. We hire a farmer now because all of us have moved to town and have jobs in town. But the farming industry is very important to me. And I think that in this rural district, it's important not just to be able to help out the towns, but to and make sure that the roads and the bridges and solar and all the different things are available. We also need to make sure that we can work with the farmers because they are one of the biggest economic developers of our state, and working with the farmers and making sure that they have what they need, and also to make sure that we can do some I can't even talk, sustainable farming procedures that are better for our environment and will help downstream with our folks dealing with waterways. So all of these things that I've put together from my learning as a state rep and a senator is what I would like to put together and put into this position as supervisor, and work from the environment all the way to the access center for mental health care in downtown Cedar Rapids. So making sure that we cover all areas and that we are fiscally responsible with that funding so everybody gets what they need.